Authority meeting. It is Monday, July 14th at 7 p.m. and I'm calling the meeting to order. I'm looking for a motion to adopt tonight's agenda.
I'll make that motion.
Motion by Francis,
I'll second that motion.
second by Burek. Any further discussion or questions? Hearing none, all in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. All right, the ayes have it, 6-0. Next item of business is approval of the Economic Development Authority meeting minutes from March 10th. And would just like to make note that Commissioner Warden's name was spelt wrong. Staff has been made aware that will be corrected throughout the permanent records. And then if there were any other changes, corrections, or additions to be noted. Okay, hearing none with that change, I'm looking for a motion to approve the March 10th, 2025 EDA meeting minutes.
I'll make that motion.
Motion by Burek,
I'll second.
second by Francis. Any further discussion or questions? Hearing none, all in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Thank you. The ayes have it 5-0 with Commissioner Henrik abstaining since he was not at the meeting. All right, next we'll move on to old business. And tonight's old business is the downtown purchase agreement, and I will turn that over to our city planner, Mr. Colthus.
Thank you, Honorable Chair and EDA members. There it is. Does it need to be closer? Okay. As you all know, earlier this year, we had recommended as an EDA to the City Council approval of a purchase agreement and a concept plan presented by North Shore Development Partners for the redevelopment of the city's property at Main and Maple. At that time, the city and the developer were still working on possibly obtaining a purchase agreement for the property located at 5210 Main Street East, and also to finalize a few issues with our purchase agreement between the developer and the city. Following additional discussions that we had with City Council relating to the acquisition of the property, an offer was presented to the owner in the beginning of June. And at the time we wrote this memorandum, we had not heard back from the owner of that property relating to that offer. And so we had moved forward with trying to identify an alternate site plan or concept plan that could be considered for the redevelopment of the city-owned property without including the 5210 Main Street. I will note at the meeting that I did get a response today from the owner, but it was outside of the parameters presented to me by the City Council. So for the purposes of what we're presenting, I think it's still relevant because the response I got was a counteroffer that was not inside of our numbers. So with that, we have tonight a revised concept plan that North Shore Partners put together, trying to work around the 5210 property and work just solely on the city's property. The concept plan that's presented in your packet, then you can see, has access coming into the property from Main Street. But it has to then shift the building around the corner, essentially further to the north, which takes away that corner retail, coffee, office opportunity that we had previously discussed. With the 5210, obviously, we'd have more latitude to be able to expand the site further to the east and then recapture that corner. We looked at a couple different ways and whether or not that could be done. What this does, though, is it kind of flips the orientation of where possible redevelopment could occur for either a city hall or for public parking. It takes the Bud Avenue right-of-way, the library parking, and the 5210 and gives us an opportunity to do something in the future with those properties, depending on what happens. Not having control over 5210, we don't really know what that looks like. This proposal has 71 unit market rate apartments. A breakdown of the units was included or can be seen right there on the plan. You can see how many 1, 2, 3 bedroom, studio 1 and 2 bedroom apartments that are shown. Its concept is a 3-story building, so it's a little bit lower than what we've talked about. We've talked or seen proposals all the way up to 5 stories in the past. This site plan still does provide for the possibility of a standalone city hall. Obviously, the city has the ability to acquire 5210. The city has the ability to work with the library to build on a portion of their property or do a joint or combined project. If the city wanted to, we still control Bud Avenue and have the ability to vacate in the future if we choose to do that. With that, the purchase agreement that we had put in place, for the most part, is the same as what we had talked about. We have not finalized TIF calculations or anything like that. That would be a next step in the city, but we have looked at TIF eligibility to ensure that we still can meet coverage requirements on the existing city property without including the 5210, and we're confident of that, although we have to do the process, or we have to go through the process of establishing that district. So with that, kind of all the terms we had talked about in the agreement stand. Really one of the biggest items that we worked through was the idea that the city would have the ability essentially to take possession of or retake possession of the city property should the developer not be able to meet the requirements that are set forth in the development agreement. And that's a provision that took a lot of back and forth between our attorney, their attorney, and trying to work through that language. But I think it's a really important kind of reversionary interest in the property that gives the city the ability to kind of get back to that property if their project, if they were to get to a point where they just didn't perform and pretty late in the process. So with that, we worked through language. The agreement covers that now in paragraph 13. If you were able to either read or understand any of that, as a lot of legalese. All the other terms that we had talked about previously are in place. We wanted to just bring this back. We had already approved the purchase agreement. We had already approved a concept plan. But given the change in the 5210 status, and then what this represents, we thought we needed to come back to EDA and then council to get confirmation that we can move forward with this plan. With that said, I know we've tried to maintain, the option to have some other retail or retail office opportunities. In order to get enough scale in a project, we've seen consistently that 70 to 120 unit project. If you start getting below that, it starts becoming not feasible. And so in order to do that, Matt and his group went back and looked at what is the footprint they need. And this is what they came back with. And I think it is fairly close to realistic as to what that site allows for. This also, just like we've talked about before in the past, this site plan would only be feasible if the city were to look at reconstructing Main and Maple, as we've talked about before. The concept plan shows some angled parking. I don't know if that's exactly where or what that parking looks like and or the sidewalk, but it's representative of what we try to accomplish with on-street parking on both Main and Maple, as well as then the off-street parking that comes off of Maple. It comes off of Main Street. So that's kind of a high-level overview. If there were questions, I'm happy to answer. The developers here tonight as well. If there's any questions regarding the site or concept plan. So really looking for discussion and then ultimately a recommendation or to move forward with this and the revised purchase agreement.
Thank you, Planner Cultus, for that update. We will start with Commissioner DeLuca with some questions.
Mark, I obviously am trying to focus on the changes from the last time we had. And at one point, we were talking about having potentially City Hall a corner of this facility. Has that discussion kind of ended at this point, that we could take 1,500 square feet or whatever number and leased to the city?
Yeah, the discussion hasn't ended. I don't want to speak for Matt. I think we can keep talking about that. We have in some terms said, let's look at whether or not we can accommodate a standalone site as well. That's one thing, but there's no parameters on that. There's no detail on that. There really hasn't been further consideration. I think if EDA it really would be council, I guess, that would go back and say we really want to have a corner of this building. I think that's something we could talk about. We've talked about it. I think it's a possibility.
Thank you.
Thank you. Other questions? No questions from any other commissioners? Commissioner Arvizo?
I don't know how to ask it, though, sorry. Can you explain why we would need 26-year TIF?
So with the TIF that we've considered, there's kind of two components to the TIF. One is TIF that would help the developer fill the gap in their financial pro forma for the project. The second piece is that the city wants to utilize tax increment for the public improvements required to facilitate this project, and that would be the redevelopment of Main and Maple. So we would project utilizing the full 26 years that is offered to the city. We would identify the expenses that would be paid for that. We'd identify what percentage the developer would get, what percentage the city would get, and we would project out how much we would need to utilize to pay city debt, and then how much the developer would get in their agreement. If we satisfied those or fulfilled those amounts, we would be able to put it back on the tax rolls sooner. That does happen often with tax increment financing, is that valuations increase maybe higher than what we had projected. And if that's the case, sometimes we can close these districts early. But because we're trying to use the money for both the developer and the public improvements, we would be projecting the need for 100% of the tax increment finance generated from this project for that full length.
Just a point of clarification that at this point, that is not a final number.
Well, and yeah, I would point out, that's how we've looked at it, but certainly that decision isn't made yet, and the amount that we'd give the developer exactly and the amount the city would utilize is not done. That's all done through our TIF plan, public hearings, and then that TIF district development process, which is kind of its own animal altogether, kind of outside of this.
So this is a draft working document, and we're.
Yeah, this gets us, what this gets us is a purchase agreement, and it gives the developer and the city the kind of reassurance that they can proceed forward with this plan in concept and then go through the process of developing all the details. Gives the city staff assurance that we can start then doing the pieces we need to do, the pro forma analysis, TIF district development, the environmental piece, and we can start doing that with confidence that if we can put it all together, we can do the project. None of this says that we can do it yet, though.
You also said something that it had under 50, I want to hear this right, that said under 70 units would not make this project feasible?
I don't want to speak for the developer, and maybe, I don't know if Matt, if you'd want to speak to that.
Mr. Alexander, you're welcome to come to the podium if you like to speak.
Thank you, members of the EDA. I appreciate your time. Thanks for having us back in here. I've been working diligently with Mark and Jacob and staff to come up with some plans. There's some challenges that we've been working through with the 5210 parcel, and I think we're came up with a plan that satisfies that. As far as the number of units, it's more of an operational economies. Once you get too small, it's just not. It gets so inefficient to run an apartment building as for anybody. It just becomes more challenging. So there's not a magic number that it doesn't work under, but this one we threw some or pulled together some numbers from our construction budget and the costs that we're aware of, and what we've made some assumptions on future tax values, and did a TIF run and kind of experimental on our side, because we've done this before, so we had some experience doing that. So after this step, I think we sit down with Northland and really vet that TIF number out. Make sure the gap can be covered. So if that answers your question.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Alexander. Any other questions for Mr. Alexander, for Mr. Coltis, or Mr. Colander?
Chair,
Yes.
if I could, we're gonna throw up one other image. We do have an image, it's not in your packet. We do have it. It's not really a image we're floating, but I do want you to see it just for purposes of our discussion. Oh, you had it? Yeah. There you go. Perfect. So this is what could happen on the property if you were to develop then parking and City Hall. This isn't the plan, but this is a concept that starts to show what that could look like.
Thank you. So tonight you've come before us asking us to consider a recommendation approval of the revised purchase agreement and concept site plan presented. If there are no further questions, I am looking for a motion for that to be moved.
I'll make that motion.
Motion by Councilmember Burek. Second by Councilmember DeLuca, or Commissioners, sorry. Any further questions or discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. The ayes have it, 6-0. Thank you very much. Thank you for being here, Mr. Alexander. Any other business to come before us this evening? Hearing none, looking for a motion to adjourn.
I'll make that motion.
Moved by Commissioner Francis.
Second.
Second by Commissioner Henrik. All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. Meeting's adjourned at 7:17.